Welcome, everyone. My name is Kelepouris. I'm a partner with Mckinsey in Athens. And I want to welcome you all to our discussion today about the future of e-commerce in the AI era. And I want to first introduce also my fellow guests. We're very excited to have with us today Patrick Warnking, the Vice President of Google for Central and Eastern Europe. Thank you, Patrick, for being with us.
Thank you.
And my fellow colleague, George Tsopelas, Chairman and Managing Partner of Mckinsey for Greece and Cyprus. Thank you both. As an introduction, earlier this year, we published our report on the potential of e-commerce for the Greek economy, which was a research collaboration we did with Google, for which we're very proud, and we want to also thank them. We believe that the report highlights the huge potential that the area of e-commerce has, focusing on specific sectors of the economy, which I would like to discuss today with my fellow speakers. Just to set the stage, Greece has made tremendous progress over the past few years, and some indicators, for example, include the amount of private investments that have gone into infrastructure, which is in the amount of 8 billion over the past 4 years, or the great progress that the government has done to facilitate digital transactions that started from a baseline of roughly 7 million 4 or 5 years back, and they're now in the order of 800 million annually. So I believe all of us that live in Greece, we can also feel that in the day-to-day. Then also the private sector itself, and when we look at, for example, the SMEs, have done a sizable increase in their presence in e-commerce, increasing their digital transactions and sales by an order of 50% compared to a few years ago. That also shows elements of moving towards the right direction. Now, these are just few facts that say that we're moving towards the right direction. And with that as a basis, I want to invite George to share his perspective as to where do we stand now as a country, and then what is ahead of us in order to go even better.
Yeah, thank you very much, Thomas. Thank you, Patrick, for being together. And thank you guys for joining. I will start by reminding us something about Greece, that if you take our companies and you compare them to the average company of the EU, then you will see a very big productivity gap. So we are talking about a gap of 2.6 times. So our companies are 2.6 times less productive than they are in the average EU. Now, when you look at that on the smaller companies, which are 95% of the total, the gap becomes 3.8 times. And why this is important? Because unless we start digitizing seriously, we will not be able to start bridging that gap. And despite the big progress that you mentioned, if you look at the different indexes and where Greece is ranked, you will be sort of disappointed. If you take the Digital Economic and Social Index, you will see that we are on the 25th out of the 27 countries position, with number 1 being Estonia, by the way. And if you look at the Mckinsey Digital Macroeconomy Index, we are 22nd out of the 27 in overall digital maturity and 24th in terms of digital commerce. So we have a lot of things that are happening, but we are still very bad behind. Now, one could ask why this is the case, and the 4 real reasons that research has proved are the following. The first one is about talent and about capabilities. The second one is about awareness. People do not know what the benefits of literacy are, and people do not know what the benefits of e-commerce are. Then there is the issue of trust, and last but not least, the lack of incentives to actually engage in increasing digital maturity and e-commerce.
Thank you, George. Patrick, I'll pass it to you, and would love to hear your perspective of how can Greece take learnings and take advantage of the momentum in Central and Eastern Europe in order to accelerate this trajectory.
It's a pleasure to be here, a pleasure to experience the Delphi spirit, innovation spirit, and also it's a pleasure to see over the last years the turnaround of Greece and the Greek economy, how it's accelerating really. And I think we are at a point where in e-commerce, but overall in everything related to IT, there's an opportunity for leapfrogging. it was described as a wave. The reality is we will see a complete new generation of software tools in all areas. And that will, as a first wave, hit e-commerce, because there is significant business in retail, in travel, which is important for Greece, of course. And this is a choice now for all companies, but also for the countries, whether they want to profit from this momentum or not, and whether they have the ambition of leapfrogging. And I can see that here, I have heard it today, that there is ambition for leapfrogging. And you can see that across Central Eastern Europe. And I'll give you a few examples. You mentioned Estonia, so e-government. They are clearly number one in the world, maybe with Denmark, on the topic of e-government. For Greece, it would be a good idea to look out for certain areas and just copy, steal with pride, right? And catch up on those areas. By the way, another country that is doing that very much at the moment is Ukraine, despite the crisis, right? They have one app, if you haven't seen that, it's called DIA app. You can do anything with that app. It's your ID, it's your driver license, it's personalized education. All government affairs and admin stuff you can do via this one app. So they are heavily trying to leapfrogging. They even want to go cashless with that. You can do it in fintech and look at Poland and Romania, how they have accelerated cashless payment. You can do it in e-commerce, logistics, which of course logistics with the naval power of Greece is core to e-commerce, right? You can look at Czechia there. How they have enabled markets and the logistics behind it that actually fuel the e-commerce. And you can see it in the startup ecosystems that some country set up. Look at Hungary, look at Bulgaria, but also look at the Baltics, where from the beginning there was incentives from the government to have talent entrepreneurs in the country, and then also to write business plans that immediately go beyond the country. I think that was key. All the business plans written in those countries from startups we see are international business plans. And so they think export from the first moment, and I think that is something interesting for Greece as well. So, and if you think of the AI, we have seen numbers this morning, there's an additional upside from 10 to 12 billion for the GDP of Greece over the next 10 years, if you get that right. And if you are among the first and get some elements of the leapfrogging right. And I usually call it a flywheel. You need to get a few components right in this flywheel to accelerate it. One is research, of course. Then there is talent. I think there Greece is set up pretty well, also on education. There is regulation. We need regulation on AI, but not too much. We need the right one. And you need a certain amount of infrastructure. And let me give you one example from my professional career. I had the pleasure to work for Google in Switzerland. And what happened there 20 years ago is that actually Google had a very, very small office, few employees. And then actually a spin-off of the ETH, which is a technical university in Switzerland, which is one of the leading universities for computer science. Actually, they came up with cartography spin-off. It was acquired by Google, and this is what today is Google Maps. And what happened is that the Google office in Zurich grew to 5,000 employees. And in the course of that, all the other tech companies opened offices there in Switzerland. And it was basically set up as a public-private challenge by the government with academia and the private sector. So for Greece, translated is you could take tourism, sustainability in tourism or something else. Government could set out the price and say, we want to be number one in sustainable tourism. Here is something where we want academia, private sector, and government work together. Or you take what I mentioned, all the shipping industry, which obviously is huge and is fueling and the backbone of e-commerce. And set up those incentives to really get this flywheel spinning with the research, with the infrastructure, with the right regulation, and then you see the positive investments and the acceleration of the economy.
Thank you, Patrick. Peggy, I don't know if you interpret it the same way. This is almost an invitation for you to find the next big idea that will attract the talent and the scale that Patrick described through Google Maps. Now, when we were looking at potential, when we were looking on our research for this report, we looked where the impact would be from e-commerce, and taking into account the structure of the Greek economy, obviously retail and hospitality were the areas and the sectors that we focused, because they represent 40% of the total GVA of the country, and then roughly 60% if you look at the production-based sectors. Therefore, it's obvious that these are the ones that we should prioritize. And then e-commerce, we believe, would enable not only expanding the reach that these sectors will have, both domestically, but maybe most importantly internationally, but then also promote productivity increase that George mentioned, and then also innovation in those companies. However, the biggest challenge would be, given the fragmentation of the economy, how does this make economical sense for these companies to invest? And does it make economical sense? And for that, I want to invite George and ask him, what would be the financial impact for a company to invest in such technologies to enable e-commerce? What's the impact for them? Is it different per type of company? And then at the end of the day, what's the impact for the economy, George?
Right. Too many questions, right? And you see me smiling because he's asking me questions that need numbers. And Mckinsey and numbers are going hand in hand. So let me start from the end. You are asking me what will be the benefit to the overall economy. So we did this exercise bottom up. So we took retail and we took hospitality, and then we looked at what it means to bring the companies forward by one step. So the ones that have no presence in digital marketing and digital commerce to the next level, and the ones that are in the intermediate to go to the next level. And we did that across medium, large, and small companies. And we modeled it bottom up. And this meant that we are gaining 4.5 billion of GVA for the economy. 2.5% in an horizon of 5, 7, or 8 years. 4.5 billion, 2.5% of the GVA of the country. And then if you split it and you see retail and you see hospitality, you will see that in both of those sectors, the GVA of those is increasing by more than 20%. And specifically, the numbers are 1.5 billion for retail and 3 billion for hospitality. So you realize that from a macro perspective, what we're talking about is massive. Now, one would ask, which is the other question that you are asking, what happens to the microeconomic environment? What is happening to the actual companies? We said before that digital maturity on e-commerce and digital marketing has 3 types of impact. The one is market reach. The second one is higher productivity, both commercial as well as operations. And the third one is, the overall umbrella of innovation. But, one could ask, okay, George, these are the 3 individual areas, but what does that translate into profitability? So we modeled that also, bottom up, and we looked at what it would mean for a smaller business in retail and hospitality to move to the intermediate level. Guys, only from the early stage to the intermediate. Do you know how much EBIT, earnings before interest and tax, margin they gain? 11 percentage points, not 11%, 11 percentage points for retail and 13% for hospitality, by just moving from the elementary to the moderate level of maturity in digital marketing and e-commerce. Now, let me give you a few examples to be even more practical. First of all, let's start with the example of a small hotel. Okay, the small hotel, what could the small hotel do that has no presence at this point in time? What kind of investments can they do? Well, one investment they can do is by basically start having some infrastructure, either physical or digital infrastructure, to digitize customer interactions. The second thing that they can do, is basically try to find channels for online presence. And the third one, using this, as I said, capability to digitize the interactions on the channels that they will select to start engaging the customers with digital marketing. That's it. Now, can you guess how is the investment to do so for a small hotel? Guys, it is 1.5 to 4,000 euro upfront investment, and it will yield per year 2.5 to 3.3 thousand euro of savings and bottom line impact and revenue. So the combined impact of the revenue and the savings will yield this bottom line impact, which is obviously delivering a return on investment of 1 to 5 times within the first year. This is modeled based on the actual numbers of specific companies on that sectors. And then let's take another example, a more sophisticated, medium-sized retailer who does the same thing. Obviously, in that case, this retailer will not focus so much in customer acquisition, but also in making something more of the existing customers. So these guys, what will they do? They will just invest in terms of having a better customer experience and a better digital marketing. They will employ tools of customer value management to know to who do we offer what. And finally, they will have professionals in order to start developing and building for themselves end-to-end the digital marketing and consumer experience thing. Last thing you asked is about how big is the impact relatively to smaller or larger. Looking at the two, smaller have always bigger impact than the larger from the transition to the higher level, from 1 time to 2.5 times. So the so what is, we are having 4.5 billion, 2.5 GVA impact. It influences by more than 10 percentage points the economics of the companies, and it basically yields more benefits to the smaller companies.
Thank you, George. Patrick, George described what's the impact of that transition for an average company in e-commerce. How does this look in the AI era? How can AI boost that? What does that look like?
Yeah, let me build on what George said and add a few thoughts. So retail, if I want to put it simple, right, and I include hospitality and tourism in kind of e-commerce. So you have three simple use cases. One is smarter operations, productivity, creativity, and by the way, that is also helping sustainability. But especially in retail, if you can have the whole transportation optimized, that makes a big difference. In hospitality, it's about occupancy and the right pricing at the right time. We all know that hotel prices are not always the same in the same night for everyone, right? So there is a lot of variables that you can optimize. And where you have a lot of data and a lot of KPIs, AI will make a big difference with the analytical capabilities that we see now. You can upload tons of data from the past and now analyze it. You couldn't do that before. So this is number one. Number two is really that you have returning customers. You can have a much better communication with returning customers, which again is important for retail, it's important for hospitality, right? I still see hotels that I visit, they send the same newsletter to everyone, right? The same newsletter to everyone. And actually with AI, you can send a personalized newsletter depending on what time of the year the person came, what kind of activity the person did, what kind of food the person maybe likes or doesn't like. So a lot of options for customization. And then number three is obviously winning new customers. Not only returning customers, but how to target new customers, right? So the whole digital marketing and personalized experience in the first contact, yeah, when you want to win a new customer. So those are very key areas. I think the case studies are already all existing. You find them with us and with others. So that is easy. What is difficult, now coming back to Greece, what is difficult? And the other countries have the same challenge. And the question will be, which country will be able to solve it faster, right? Is the backbone of the economy, which is small and medium enterprises. How do you get them on board for this, right? How do you leverage, how do you get penetration in this application of the new software tools, right? Throughout the long tail of small and medium enterprises. And here's the interesting thing. The key element here is upskilling. These new AI tools, and that is important for all of us here in the room as well. You don't need to study computer science to actually apply them. They are pretty easy, but most people have kind of fear to get going, to start with it, to apply them for the first time, right? I remember when I started my professional career, I had to learn how to use pivot tables. It's not rocket science. after I have done it a few times, I was able to do it and I was much more productive, right? It's the same. It's as simple as pivot tables. You just have to learn these tools. A little bit of upskilling, a little bit of practice, but how do we bring that to the small and medium enterprises at scale? The country that will be able to do that faster will have a competitive advantage. All countries, again, all countries and companies today with these new AI tools are at the same starting line. So you need the ambition to leapfrog, and then you need to exercise well. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. And speaking of action, right now, 20% of the new ESPA package is already assigned in digital maturity initiatives, and an amount equivalent of roughly 4% of the country's GDP, which is the highest in Europe from the RRF package, is also assigned to this type of activities. And with that in mind, right, having in mind that we have all of these resources, George, I want to go back to you, and Patrick already mentioned about reskilling. What are the other enablers we will need in order to capture this value here?
No, I want to go back to what I said in the beginning about the fact that Greece has 95% of its companies at small scale, and that the gap of productivity between these small companies to the European average is 3.8 times. 3.8 times. The total is 2.6, and the smaller 3.8. Which means also that the gap of productivity between the small and the big one in Greece is much bigger than it is between the big and the small in other countries. Guys, listen, we might be having more tourism, we might be having RRF, we might be having a relatively stable fiscal environment, we might be having a healthy banking system, but unless Greece fixes its productivity structural issues, and unless it fixes the structural difficulties of its trade balance, the economy will not be growing as it should at 3 or 4%, but it will be growing at a much lower pace. So what we are talking about here is not just about buying a few products over the internet. This is about using something that eventually will boost AI. It will boost cloud computing. It will boost data analytics and data management, things that are going to have a holistic impact on the economy. Now, you are asking me how to do this. You mentioned also upskilling. Listen, I said in the beginning that the 4 difficulties of doing this are skills and capabilities. The second one was awareness. The third one was trust. And the last one was incentives. Let's take them one by one briefly. First, talent and capabilities is not only upskilling. It's also 2 other things. We looked at many different countries, both in Europe and beyond, to find examples, and we found plenty. And whoever is going to read the report, you're going to get a lot of inspiration out of it. First, you basically need to have this program like Greece is having for regaining repatriation of the international talent, which is really, really, really important. And also, you have a program of reskilling, but not reskilling in general, reskilling in different categories of people. And the next one would be the awareness. Currently, most people do not know what is the benefit of being literate in this, what is the benefit both for the individual as well as for the company from this digital commerce maturity. So we need some focused campaigns that go on specific messages to specific people. Then you have the issue of trust. There is market research that illustrates that a large portion of the population simply does not trust that. So this is very simple. It's a matter of defining some standards, and there are examples of other countries that we can learn from on what the standards are, and then specific methods of accrediting the people and the companies that are doing this in order for the customers to feel safe about the data, the privacy, and overall the security of the transactions. And last but not least, guys, the incentives. You know, many people are talking about, give me incentives. What does this mean basically? There are a number of countries that provide sales tax incentives or deductibles for the ones that are having the initial phase of digital commerce. In addition, they give incentives for companies to develop this capability. And last but not least, we are having a situation whereby the countries are pushing e-procurement. Greece needs to push e-procurement significantly given the large size this is having into the total. These are some of the ways, Thomas, that we can actually do. There are specific reforms that have been outlined based on our understanding of Greece and of other countries. What is important to say is, unless the structural productivity gap is addressed And unless we deploy this kind of methodology to do so, at least to a big part of this, we are not going to be able to actually deliver the growth promise that we have and get to the levels that we want to get. Our aspiration is to get to a reasonable level of digital maturity and e-commerce by 2030. Thank you.
Thank you, George. And the final question to you, Patrick. Given that we have the resources and we have the plan, what is the role that Greece can play as a technology and innovation hub in the region? You also mentioned the example from Switzerland and other countries. How does this look like for Greece?
Please forgive me and allow me 3 recommendations. Number 1, keep the amazing Delphi spirit with the ambition of leapfrogging. That is really a great starting point. Second, start with ourselves, right? I changed my agenda for this year. I'm 25 years in the digital industry. I need more time to learn. I freed my agenda. I'm investing 2 or 3 hours a week on learning these new tools. I don't know whether you're playing enough around with this yourself, because we need to lead by example, right, in our communities, in our companies. So have you played with the chatbots, the AI chatbots? Are you doing that every day? Are you applying them for some topics you want to solve? Did you play with, for example, a platform from ours called Vertex AI? If you haven't seen it, take 1 or 2 hours. You can build your own model for whatever you want. It's free of charge. You can play around with it. Learn these new tools. Remember the pivot tables that we used to learn 30 years ago? Now these new tools, you need to learn them. And then have an ambition for the country. And if we really want to have the small and medium businesses on board, we are talking about upskilling and reskilling 4 to 5 million people, right? Has a huge overlap with the general public. So make a big ambition on how many people you want to upskill, and make a big alliance of organizations that work together on this and do not compete on this. This morning we had the pleasure to announce a new skilling platform and initiative for Greece. If you want to check it out, Grow with Google Greece, you will find it. Free online training courses on AI. Anybody can learn this. And I think that is important that we get that across and get more people engaged on this journey. Thank you.